Our first speaker tonight is Larry, and he is from the Dunbar Group of Little Rock, Arkansas. Okay. Over to you, Larry.
Good evening. My name is Larry, and I'm definitely an alcoholic. Through God's grace and the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous and the fellowship, I sit here tonight and in the UK, and for that I'm eternally grateful. Our book says we're supposed to tell how it was, what happened, and how it's like today. And how it was for me, growing up literally in a family of five and being the youngest, and having feelings and emotions of certain circumstances and situations of life that I didn't have any coping skills nor explanation of why I had them. And those feelings I can remember very vividly of self-pity and fear and anger. And I couldn't reconcile a lot of things that I saw going on in the community that I grew up in. Definitely have coming from a mom, which I call from the old school, that didn't explain a lot of things to you. You know, you just kind of listened and followed directions. And I can remember having these feelings at a very early age before I took my first drink. And I took my first drink at the age of 6. My father, not being an alcoholic that I knew of, about once a year he would bring home a fifth of wine from where he worked. And this particular year, he brought it home, and I asked him to taste some, and he gave me a cap. 1 cap of wine. And at the time, I thought that it was the taste of the wine that made me go back and keep drinking the wine. And but he gave me 1 cap of wine, and the first time I ever used alcohol, I got drunk. And it wasn't until about 25 years later that I recognized that was abnormal. I didn't know that was abnormal. And I thought that the reason that I drank almost a whole fifth of alcohol was because I liked it. But to my consternation, when I walked in my, my second AA meeting, my first AA meeting was 1972, and my second AA meeting was 10 years later in 1982. And it was not until I was sitting in the back of this meeting and listening to Joe explain the first step, the difference between an alcoholic and normal people, and the allergy and the obsession, until it dawned on me that the first time I took a drink, I got drunk, and that was abnormal. Normal people don't do that. And the fact that why, out of the attempts that I had made to try to control my drinking, failed. You see, from a very early age, it dawned on me that I had problems. And later on, I developed 2 problems. You see, my problems was my thinking and my drinking. And I had those problems from inception, how I thought, how I perceived things. And then when drink entered into my life, it really, instead of just getting muddled, it got worse. And, I can go through the drunkalogs and all the things that happened, but I will tell you, because of my thinking and making bad decisions and my drinking, trying to mask those decisions and how I felt about myself and how I interacted with people, I threw away an education. I was through football scholarship, and I also threw away a marriage, and I also threw away a career in the armed services. You see, I tried a lot of things in my life. I tried doing normal things like normal people do, like get married, go to work, tell the truth. But I couldn't do those things. And so throughout my drinking career and my behavior deteriorating, I sort of ran through life like the book talks about, like a tornado. And it was not until 1982, and when my life was kind of placed in a box where I was looking at a lot of prison time through my efforts of me doing it my way, and I'm smarter than you, and I'm not hurting anybody, and I know what I'm doing. It's the other people. I ended up in a situation where we were just talking about tonight that either I had to accept AA or die. It was simple as that. And I take a little digression here, a little sidebar. It's our program today is kind of one of such as, I guess, a social club. People that come to us today kind of lose the sight of what we're trying to save our lives. They're either trying to get this back or trying to do this or dodge this. But, the ultimate thing is that this is a program of life, of how we live. And it took me a lot of hard knocks to come to that realism. And so I'm sitting in this meeting listening to this guy explain the difference between an alcoholic and a normal drinker. And as he's explaining this, he's telling me why I could never use alcohol safely. Because every time that I used alcohol, my behavior would deteriorate. I would end up in jail or somewhere in the gutter. And I can remember all through my life trying to change my mode of drinking. I would change from beer to wine, and from liquor. I wouldn't drink bourbon. I'd change to scotch, and I did all this stuff throughout my life trying to learn how to live life like normal people with alcohol in my life. So in 1982, I never forget that. It was June of 82, and I was looking at, I'd parlayed my behavior and my drinking into a lot of prison time. And I had gone through what we call the VA hospital 9 times throughout that 10-year period between 72 and 82, because I was sitting in the VA hospital and they told me to go to an AA meeting, and I'm sitting in this meeting and I'm telling myself, this is for losers. I'm not an alcoholic. So I got up and left. And every time that I would go into detox, I would go in, I would detox, and I would leave the program. I would never stay for the program. I'd detox and I'd leave what we call AMA, against medical advice. And I did this 9 times, but this particular time, I had checked myself into the hospital, and they told me, they said, Mr. Gaines, veteran or not, if you don't stay for the full program, this time you can't come back here. And so here I am in this program, and I'm in pajamas. And this was about the 28th of June. And after I had detoxed and moved to the ambulatory side, where you could walk around in pajamas, I'm watching the telly, and they're throwing this, what we call, the 4th of July celebration. And they're offering free beer for the whole community, and free food, and parasailing. And I'm sitting there and I'm in my pajamas in detox, and one man said, "Man, they're serving free beer. You could check yourself out, go get smashed, come back to detox." And the other man says, "Well, what are you gonna do when it's over?" Because see, at this particular time, I'm looking at a lot of prison time, I'm homeless. Half the people in my life didn't want to see me, the other half wanted to do something to me. That's what type of life did I live. That was a pretty bad situation to be in. All my immediate family and my friends, when I came around, they would maybe say something to me and give me a couple of bucks to get me away from them. Here's 10, 20 bucks. You're on your way to the bus station or wherever you're going, And so here I am sitting in detox. And a friend of mine that I run across when I was in jail had told me that if I needed help, just to call him. And so I called him, and he brought me into this program that was about 18 months long. And I can remember being in this program, and the thing that dawned on me was, here it was, I was in this program for 60 days, and for the first time in my life, I was 31 years old, that I didn't have any type of mood or mind-altering substance in my body. No drinking, no nothing. And the next thing that dawned on me was, the thought hit me, you don't need this. You thought that you needed this, you've just been wanting it all these years. And the next thought right after the end says, well, how do you quit wanting it? Because I was clearly faced with a situation of liking the effects that it produced, but also trying to separate myself from the consequences, which was totally impossible. And every time that I could remember, our book says the sense of ease and comfort, I couldn't remember the consequences. And here I am this time, I've got a little bit of clarity, and I had recycled my life over and over and over again, so I had a decision to make. And needless to say, just to kind of fast forward, I had been put in a situation at this program with my first sponsor, whereas I had gone to court, and I was looking at habitual criminal. And because of my behavior and my drinking. And I had gone to court, and the judge had given me a pass and told me that he would send me back to this program, and that if I left the program, he was going to institute the habitual criminal, which is 21 years flat, plus I had about 15 charges, and he was going to give me 10 years on each charge. And then on top of that, if I left, he would give me a 5-year escape charge. And then I had more charges with the federal government and another county, which I had already received a suspended sentence. So he had told me that if I left this program, that he was going to institute all these charges and call the federal government and ask them to prosecute me to the fullest extent of the law and revoke the 5 years. So that was a lot of time, more time than people in the room. So I was in this box. And I knew from previous sentences, being in prison, that I could not do it on my own. I tried every way that I could to try to control my drinking and try to change my behavior. And here it was, I was in this program, having to look at myself squarely for the first time without the use of drink. And I kept breaking little rules and regulations, and I kept embarrassing myself. And I would tell myself, we're not going to do this anymore. Why do you keep putting yourself in situations and embarrassing yourself? Well, we're smarter than that. And I'm talking to myself all the time, but every time I would do something stupid and I would get called on the carpet for it, and I'd feel real bad. And I tried all that I could to stop doing what I was doing, but I couldn't. And I blamed it on the alcohol, but this time I was not under the influence, and I started questioning my sanity. Are you crazy? Why are you continuing to doing these things? You say you was going to stop. But I found out later that self can't control self. I could not stop doing what I was doing. It wasn't about the alcohol anymore. It was about the unmanageability of life. I could not manage my life. I was 31 years old, homeless, looking at a lot of time, behind on my child support, and my name was Mud, and I couldn't manage my life. So my first sponsor told me, he says, hey, he took me to the graveyard. And he proceeded to talk to me and tell me about my behavior in a nice way. Didn't put me down, just kind of told me some truths about myself. And he says, you got to make a decision today. You either got to get in the boat and help us row the boat, or you got to get out. Well, you can't straddle the fence. You can't ride in the boat and have your leg in the water, slowing us down. You got to make a decision what you're going to do. And he said, before you make it, if you can tell yourself that you're not going to take another drink, he says, I'll write the judge and tell him that you have completed the program successfully and remove all of that court pressure off of you, and you can walk away a free man. But he said, but if you can't, you can stay. You see, that day, I took step 2, backing away from step 1. I didn't know about step 2. I didn't know about any power greater than myself. But I did know about step 1, the problem that I had encountered in my life and how I had tried every way I could to master that. So fear kind of made me accept step 2. And he says, this is what I want you to do. I want you to write me a synopsis on step 1 and how it applies to your life and the relativity of it, and have it on my desk the very next morning. If you don't have it on my desk the very next morning, we won't talk about this and you still have to go. So needless to say, I sat down and did my assignments. And step 2, the same way. He gave me my assignment every day, and I had it the next morning, and we discussed it and sat down. And when we got to step 4, this is what he told me. He says, I want you to put everything down in your life that you can remember. I want you to go back as far as you can remember. And I don't want you to skip anything. He says, if you skip anything, I'll know it, and I'll still ask you to leave. And I don't care if it takes you all night long, you have this on my desk tomorrow morning. And it literally took me all night long. I sat up all night and did a complete and thorough 4th step. And the next morning, when I saw him, we sat down and he looked at my 4th step, and I was looking at him just like I'm looking at you all now, looking at any change, any grimace, any frown, any displeasure, any change in his facial expression. And I didn't see any. He was looking at it, and he just said, man, you got some problems with some sex. This is just downright dishonesty, and you've been selfish, and you just been spoiling. And he went to talk to me about my inventory. And in the midst of it, he stopped. And he said, you left something out. And fear gripped me. And I did leave one thing out. And the thing that I left out was a beef that I had got into with some other guys. And it was, matter of fact, it was a guy had gotten killed. And because I came from the old school of thought that you didn't tell on yourself. And I asked him, I said, well, man, what if it's something that the statute of limitation doesn't run out on? He says, I'm not the police, I'm not the judge, I'm not the prosecutor. I'm here to help you get free. And we talked about it. That was the only thing that I left out. And we sat down and talked about that thing. And as of right now, we speak, 2 guys that was involved is deceased, and 1 guy is serving life plus 21 in the penitentiary. And why God spared me, I know today. I used to question and wonder about that. Why the fate of the other 3 guys and why my fate? But I know today it was only to be a servant to my fellow man and him, and to carry this message of recovery that he's given me. Because see, we're talking about a person's life on the line, and it was my life. I knew that if I didn't do something that day, that I was going to recycle my life, and I was going to either end up in the penitentiary for the rest of my life, or I was going to die on the street like a dog. I wasn't trying to get a wife back. I didn't have that. I wasn't trying to get a job back. I didn't have that. I wasn't trying to get all that back. I was just trying to find a way to live. And so I did this 4th step with my sponsor. And he shared part of this 5th step with me and asked me, did I want to remain that way? And I said, no, I don't. And I didn't really feel any different until I did the 6th and 7th step. And I put fire to that stuff. And I just felt a little different. Nothing great, just a little bit different. But the change that I could see that happened in my life was when I started on my 8th and 9th step, when I started paying my amends. My first 2 years in recovery, the only thing that I could do was go to work, make meetings, and come back home and pay the people that I owed. I owed over $35,000, and the job that I had was a minimum wage job, and I had to budget and live off $10 a week, and I smoked cigarettes at the time, but every bit of money that I made was for paying my amends. I didn't own a watch until I was 2 years sober. But in 2 years, about 2.5 years, I had paid off 3/4 of my amends. And, another little sidebar here. People do a lot of things to try to build your self-esteem. They try to get educations, they try to belong to certain clubs, they try to lose weight, they try to do this. But what I found is the most permanent thing that builds a person's self-esteem is when they're honest and they take responsibility of their actions by paying your amends. Because each time that I pay my amends and I correct a wrong, I can look another person's in the face, but more importantly, I'm in touch with myself and God. Because I know that I don't owe anybody anything, and I've done my level best to correct my mistakes. And that's when I feel good. It's when I'm conscious of God helping me and doing the best. So anyway, I make these amends and I pay these people, and I'm feeling good about myself, and I'm learning through the steps and how to take a look at myself on a daily basis, which is the step 10. And even though I grew up in a church family and always knew or believed in God, but I didn't know God, because I found to my consternation that it was other people's understanding of God I had a problem with. I didn't have a problem with my understanding of anything. And the book gave me a simpler way. It says, a God of my understanding. And so I didn't have to take my mom's or my dad or the minister's understanding. I had to develop mine. There was two things that was prevalent to me. First of all, I didn't know God, and second of all, that he could come to me in my understanding. And the third thing that I learned is that the way that I was using prayer was completely, totally wrong. You see, I use prayer as a foxhole prayer when I'd get in trouble. God, will you please help me out of this? If you do this, I won't do this again. Or I'd use them as a Christmas tree list. God, will you do this? Give me this, take this away. That's the way and our book tells us that the only thing that we can pray for is the knowledge of his will and the power to carry that will out. That made it real simple to me. And so today, I just ask, simple, thy will, not mine, be done. Because each time that I do that, I'm willing to give up self and to accept life on life terms. So today, the 12th step, having had a spiritual awakening as the result of these steps, I try to carry the message. The message is simple. As a result of the steps, I've had a spiritual awakening. And I understand today that I can carry the message, but I can't carry the alcoholic. And as I carry the message, the other part is practice the principles in all my affairs. And my affairs today is what I have done and what I'm doing and what I'm going to do in the future. And as long as I do the best that I can and achieve spiritual progress as opposed to perfection, God always enables me to do whatever it is that he needs me to do, not what I need. Anything that he needs, he enables me to do that. It's never failed in 24 years. And, and that, I'll end in saying is, this is the greatest thing to be able to have order and chaos. As the whole world today, with all of the turmoil that we have everywhere, people blowing up everywhere, we have a unique opportunity to live better than most people. People commit suicide and all manner of things, and here we are, human beings, and we have a way of life that is not offered to most people. We have something that's stabilizing, that's comforting, and that's endless, as long as we are willing to remain servants and help our fellow man. And that's basically, I'm telling you, and I can't think anything better. But I thank you all for letting me share my experience, strength, and hope. And I'm telling you, I'm eternally grateful. Thank you very much.